Welcome everybody, this is Niclas Huschenbeth and this is an analysis of my game against strong Ukrainian Grandmaster Yaroslav Zherebukh. We played against each other just a few days ago in the Pan-American Intercollegiate Chess Championship. Keep it short, it's the college championship in the United States. I was playing there with the team, my team UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and we were playing against his team, Texas Tech University, who actually went on to win the competition. So I've played against Yaroslav twice before and our score is even. I beat him last year in the US Masters. Actually, you can find the link to this game in the description. I also recorded a video there. And then I lost against him this year pretty clearly in the Final Four, which is the ultimate college tournament. If you end up in the best four place in this college championship that we played in just now, then you go to the Final Four and there you determine the winner or the college champion of the United States. So in this game, for the first time against him, I was white and I played as always e4, and he surprised me by playing c6, the Caracan defense, which I believe he has never played before in his life. So obviously I didn't expect that, but I just played what I usually play, the advanced variation, and I was waiting to see what he had in store for me, what he had prepared. So he's going for knight e7 here. There are pretty much two big branches here. Black can either go and play c5, or he can first play other moves and maneuver and maybe not play c5 at all, but usually at some point Black does play c5. So there are many options for Black and many different setups, and it makes it pretty difficult because you never know what you're going to get. He played h6, which I was familiar with. Knight bd7, knight d7, knight b3. Now he surprised me playing bishop g6, and I think it's slightly unusual and has been rarely played before. If people play h6, usually they push the bishop all the way back to h7, then the knight can go to g6 or to f5, or in some case, if Black feels aggressive, he might even play g5. But bishop g6 I have not seen before, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense, because the position we get here on the board, Black can also achieve the same position without playing h6, and I think h6 is actually not a useful move for him, because I'll get there in just a moment. Here I can play g4, which I didn't do, but I maybe should have. And without a pawn on h6, Black has the option to play knight h6, which is really interesting. And I've even had games there where Black plays a knight back to g8, which looks strange, but Black has provoked this weakness. However, with the pawn on h6, Black has to play knight h4. And in this case I can take, and this is the whole idea. Now you free up the way for the f pawn, push the f pawn, and you of course want to play f5, which Black shouldn't allow, so Black plays f5 himself, and then bishop d3, pinning this pawn. And I wasn't sure about this position. It's just always so complicated, so difficult to play. King h1, queen e8, rook g1, and you keep the tension here. Black can never take because of queen takes g4, but it's just a really complicated position, and I guess I didn't feel like taking the risk here by weakening myself by playing g4. I mean, g4 is a double-edged move. Of course you gain space, but you also severely weaken your own king. By the way, you might ask yourself, why does Black play h6 in the first place? If he plays knight d7 here, in this case, in this position, White can grab the bishop, or rather, first White plays knight bd2, and if then Black plays bishop g6, White can play knight h4 and grab the bishop here. But Black can play very precisely if he plays not knight e7, but let's say knight d7, castle, bishop g6, knight bd2, and now knight h6 to not allow knight h4, and then we reach the same position as we had in the game, but without a pawn move h6. Alright. Let's return to the game right here. So I was thinking about g4, but the other standard move in this position is c4. And honestly, I've played this position for a while and I'm still trying to understand it. It's quite difficult. So first you push a4, a5 to restrict black's options on the queen side. So for example, he doesn't have knight b6 now. So if he was to take on c4, he would have great difficulties to bring this knight on d7 to d5, right? So this is the whole idea of playing a4, a5. Otherwise, black would just play knight b6, knight d5. So he didn't take. He played castle. And now I felt like he made an inaccuracy, because usually people always play a6 at some point. And I thought that must be because they're preventing a6 from white. So I went for this. So a6, black has to play b6. If he takes here, I can play just rook takes a6, and all the pawns are weak now, and this is not good. It's just not good. Or I can even play c5, might be also just very strong, and then take on a6, next move, knight a5, and so on, and this looks pretty good. So b6, and now I took on d5. He also has to take with the c pawn. If he takes with the e pawn, now I really play g4, and these pawns are rolling, and black has great difficulties here to stop these pawns. So this is really good for white. So he took with the c pawn, and this is the position I want to achieve. I thought that he has some difficulties with his knight on d7, because his knight doesn't have a great perspective, nowhere to go. And I thought he's really cramped in here in his position. So now the question was how to set up my piece. And I played bishop f4, which I think is normal. I mean, the bishop usually doesn't go to f4, but there's no right square for the bishop on the board anyway. I saw a game where white played bishop d2 and put the bishop on c3, which is interesting, but not sure if this is the right place either. Black plays knight b8, improving this knight, going to c6, and it's still very much complicated, and I'm not sure who's better. I would feel always it's white because of the space advantage, but it's not easy to make use of it. So I played bishop f4, rook c8, and queen d2. I just felt this was the most harmonious setup to connect my rooks and play rook c1. I have to not take this phone call right now, I'll take that later. However, queen d2 was in inaccuracy. I should have occupied the c file right away and play rook c1. Or rather, not occupy, but put my rook on the c file. And if now bishop h5 like in the game, now I can take, and the difference is I can put my queen on d3 now, which is better square than d2, because the queen is controlling the c4 square. And now I put my rook on c1, and I have slight advantage here, but maybe not too much. But it's very comfortable, and I think it's also pretty much risk-free for white to play for win. If black takes on c1 and I take with the queen, knight b8, now queen d7 has to be prevented, so bishop b5. And this also looks comfortable for white. The knight, the whole idea worked out for white here. The knight is terrible on b8. So I play queen d2, he plays bishop h5, and I play rook c1. And now he surprised me with taking on f3, and I didn't quite understand where he is going, why he's doing that. But his idea became evident in the next move. I took with the bishop. The alternative would have been to play rook takes c8, which I thought about for a brief moment, but then didn't do it, which was fine. Here after rook c1, black has a strong move, knight c5, and I'm worse, because if I take on f3, knight takes b3, rook takes c8, knight takes d2, and in the very end I'm down a pawn here on d4. And if I take the knight, then well, the black just takes the bishop and takes back, and I'm also down a pawn, so that's no good. By the way, just to clarify, c takes b6 also doesn't work because of bishop c4, and these pawns are not strong enough, so that's good for black. So I would need to take back here on f3. But now g5, bishop e3, and we see the difference with the queen on d2. Now queen c4 is quite strong, and black is doing okay. I'll just drink something real quick. Okay, bishop takes f3, and now rook c4. I didn't see this at all. Very strong move, which I really had no clue that he was planning to play that. And the main problem is the rook is just cemented on c4. And it took me a while to realize to begin with. So if I play bishop e2, he just plays b5 and he sacrifices the exchange, and I should really not take this exchange. After bishop takes c4, b takes c4, knight a5, queen b6, it's just terrible. I mean, this knight on a5 is out of play, the pawn on d4 is weak, bishop b4 is a threat right now, so a computer already suggests to just give the knight up and just try to hold here, but of course black is clearly better here. Computer says I should play g4 here, but I'm also not happy. Knight h4 was what I was expecting. Alternatively, black can also play bishop b4 and then bring the knight back to e7, which is maybe even better. So knight can come to c6, queen b6, and black can just always sacrifice the exchange. I mean, here maybe it's not, even d takes c4 is very interesting, but let's just say b takes c4, and there's just no play for me. I mean, this pawn chain is very strong, and black will collect this pawn on a6, and I really have to desperately try to attack him here on the king side, because otherwise he's just going to steamroll me, and I didn't feel like doing this. So in the end I just decided to take on c4, even though I didn't like it, but I already spent at least half an hour on this position and I had to do something. So here knight goes back to c1, b5, knight b6, that makes a lot of sense. So now I play bishop c6, which is also fine. I want to have the bishop close to my pawn on a6, so I want the bishop to not be cut out if black plays knight d5. Okay, b4 is forced. The pawn has to be protected. Now I played a not so good move, queen c2. Originally I planned rook c1, which I should have played, and then queen c8, bishop b7, queen d7. The position remains quite complicated. It's roughly equal. But I feel like maybe a little bit more easy to play, a little bit easier to play for black. However, I do have that very strong light squared bishop, which he won't get rid of anytime soon. And it's controlling a lot of squares, right? So that's helpful. Yeah, I play queen c2. I want to bring my queen to e4 maybe, and it seemed more natural to play the queen to c2 and maybe the rook to d1. But what I missed was that he can just take this pawn, which he didn't do, fortunately for me. I thought here after bishop e3 I was winning, but I overlooked that the queen drops back to d8 and protects the knight on b6, so black could take here with the queen, and queen takes c4 is now just losing on the spot because of this pin. b3, rook c3, bishop d2, and I can resign. So after queen d8 I shouldn't take on b6 for no reason, and I want to play queen e4, but it's just a pawn. I mean, I do have the bishop pair, but still it's not enough. Black has really good chances here, even though I can fight, of course. So instead of taking on d4, he played bishop g5. Now I play rook d1, and believe it or not, black once again could have taken on d4. Very strong queen sacrifice here. If knight takes d4, queen e4, and knight takes c6. I didn't even consider this at all. The computer just shows it. And what happens is that, okay, right now black's threatening checkmate, but these pawns are suddenly becoming very strong. For example, after g3, black plays c3, and if I take the knight now on c6 and rook c8, I have to give my queen, because otherwise this pawn is just gonna queen. C takes b2, and then I'm a pawn down in a knight endgame. And if I don't take on c6 but take on c3, then then b3, and knight d3 and knight a5, knight coming to c4. Black is clearly better and has really good chance to win. Okay, I'm pretty sure he also didn't see this, or probably not even considered this. It's quite unusual that you give your queen for rook and knight, which is supposed to be not the greatest combination. Usually you do want to have rook and bishop at least, or at least some kind of bishop. But black had rook and 2 knights, but still this pawn on c4 and the pawn on b4, they just are very close to queening. So here he surprised me though. He played knight e7. I mean, if he wants to go for knight e7, I feel like he should play like this. Take on f4 first, because in the game it seems just like an unnecessary weakening of his king with the pawn on g5, which is weak, and he will always have to worry a little bit about his king's safety. So bishop b7 and knight d5, and now I was not too short on time, but I had to move quickly, and I overlooked his idea, or this one idea completely. Played knight g3, and then I noticed it, what I had done. I should take on d5 here, and the position is equal. Of course, I didn't want to give up my pride, the pride of my position. Bishop takes the bishop on b7, but I should have done that here. And now queen takes d5, knight g3, and I can try maybe to get my knight on nice squares, but the position remains equal. However, it's still very complicated. So here after knight g3, he plays b3, and now I realize he wants to go c3 and put another knight on c4, and this looks awful. So I bailed out pretty much with queen b1, but one way or the other my position is not to be envied. I can play queen c1, and it is a better try. I'm sure he wants to go c3, and it looks really dangerous, and I felt like, especially with my low time, I wouldn't be able to hold here. Knight c4, but with the computer, of course, everything's possible. And here after knight e4, b2, queen c2, queen b6. In fact, due to my counterplay against the weakened black king, I do hold. So black threatens knight a3, so knight takes g5 first, threatening checkmate, of course, g6, and now rook b1, and knight a3, and now the white counterplay is just in time with queen e4 threatening queen h4, king g7 to meet queen h4, rook h8, but now white takes on d5 and queen h4, and we have a nice perpetual here because black has no way to defend his pawn other than rook f8, and then queen just drops back, and that's a draw through move repetition. But c3 is not the best move. Black can keep his advantage here by playing knight f4, and just my pieces don't have any moves. And knight a4 is a threat now to put more pressure on this pawn. So I would need to play a move like rook d2, and on g4 it seems really difficult to play for white. So I decided to sacrifice the exchange by playing queen b1. c3, and I have to take, of course, I can't allow a pawn ever to go to c2, that's obvious. So I sacrificed the exchange, and I was still hoping here to get something going, because once again his king is weakened, and maybe somehow I get my piece over. But one problem is that I don't have space yet for my king, so I still need to spend one move playing h3, and this is indeed a problem. So he plays knight c4, good move, threatening knight takes e5, which is actually difficult to cope with. If I play queen g4, then he plays queen a5, and this is threatening queen e1, which is also not not easy to cope with. If I take on g5 though, he doesn't play queen e1, he just plays queen a1. And then takes on d4, takes on e5, and I can resign. And if I play h3, well then he plays queen e1, and well, knight f1, knight e2, so king h2, queen takes f2, queen takes g5, and just queen takes d4 again. Just not in time. Not in time for me to play knight h5 because queen takes e5 check. So I had to find something else. I was really low on time. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes here. Play queen a1. It's the only move I could come up with. Keep my pawn protected and not lose on the spot. And he played knight a5, which I was happy to see. Queen b6 is very simple and very strong at the same time. Just bring the queen out, preparing rook d8, and now I have to passively play knight e2. Now he plays knight a5, and if I move my bishop, he just picks up the pawn on a6. I can still try here and do something like this, but this should be losing for white, no doubt. So he played knight a5, threatening to take on b7 as well as playing knight b3. But I moved bishop e4, and here I had spotted this idea to bring my queen over by playing queen d1. Now I'm threatening to take on b3. And now queen h5, and that's what I was talking about. That was my hope to get some play against his king. However, it's still losing. But here he made an inaccuracy, he played rook e8. So knight f5 is the way to go. Knight takes f5, and now very beautiful move, I think, just g6. So black doesn't take, because here once again there's this checkmate threat. G6 doesn't help, the bishop just takes, and that's a draw. Of course also it's important that my queen is covering the d1 square. He could try rook e8 here, and here I would need to find e6 when I still have pretty good chance to hold. F takes e6. Now white is already better after bishop g6, so that's no good idea for black. But queen f6, e takes f7, queen takes f7, queen h7 check, king f8, and bishop e4. And I think I have pretty good chances here to hold because the black king is weak. But instead g6. Yeah. Now knight h6. King g7, and best try is to play knight takes f7. I mean, I can't protect the knight anyway. Queen h3. Apart from that, rook h8 also wins, of course. Queen d1 is checkmate. So knight takes f7, and we get into this endgame, which is losing. I'm really certain. g3, rook d2, g4. This gotta be losing. Okay, so I was lucky he missed that. After rook e8, I think I'm pretty close to holding actually. So queen h7 now, but it's also still very low on time, of course. We didn't get any additional time, it was just 1.5 hours for the whole game, 30 seconds increment per move. So king f8 and now h4, and I'm glad I found this move, very important move. And here he made a mistake. And by the way, I should maybe mention this. The whole problem here in this position is that he has this threat knight e2. So I can't just take on g7 because he just mates me with knight e2, opening the way for the queen, and no matter what I play, it's queen d1 and checkmate. So that's why I played h4. To get space for my king. He still played knight e2, which I expected, but that was a mistake. He should take on h4 when I play queen h4, queen h8, king e7, queen h4, king d7, queen f4, and black is still better here, but this should be really difficult because once again the king is just out in the open, and I have counterplay. So he played knight e2, and I took on e2, and that was also a mistake. So I didn't exploit his inaccuracy. I should have played king h2, but this is not easy. So there are 2 points here. I thought after queen d1 we're just transposing to what we have in the game. But here I can take on g7 because I'm not checkmated on g1 because I have king h3. Right, so with the pawn on h3 this would not work. But here it does work, surprisingly. My king just runs to g4. And black even has to be a little bit careful here. Queen f6, and now black has to go to f8 and allow the perpetual of queen h8, because if he goes to d7, he might be in trouble here. Bishop c6, important move. King d8, queen f8, and king takes c6 here. I think white is already better. So that's one point. The other important point is that after knight takes g3, f takes g3, g takes h4, I have the very cute move bishop c6. And it turns out that black has no advantage here. He can take on g3, I play king h3, avoid all checks, and queen h8 is the threat, and there's not much black can do. For example, king e7, check, f6, take, check, bishop takes, and queen takes a7, and black needs to give a perpetual. Yeah, so I missed that. Took on e2, he checks, queen takes e2, and now I have to play f3 because just everything's hanging. I thought originally I want to play something else. Yeah, I want to take on g5, but it just I can just resign here. But f3, fortunately for me, still works, securing the bishop on e4. And now once again I have this threat of taking on g7. And here he gives the advantage pretty much out of his hand. He has to find one really precise move, and quite difficult move to find. He played queen f2, which looked strong, but better was queen e1. Similar ideas here to bring the rook to d1 though, not to d2, what he did in the game. So g6, and now rook d1, and g takes f7, check, and black forced the queen exchange, and this endgame is also winning for black. Without these pawns, maybe not so much, but I always have to protect my a6 pawn, of course, because otherwise I can just resign. And here, this is winning for black. Maybe still black needs to play some precise moves, but he should manage. But fortunately for me, he played queen f2. Now I take on g5, queen h8 wouldn't be a good idea here. Just rook d8 wins on the spot because I'm running out of checks here, and rook d1 is coming. So h takes g5, rook d8. I thought it's almost over here, but I still found a way to play on g6, rook d2, and just queen h3, defending the pawn on g2. And now there's no way for him to really make progress. I mean, after queen e3, I think I can even play queen h8 and queen takes g7. He has one check here, but that's about it. Yeah. So he took on g6, bishop takes. Now I'm threatening queen h8 and queen e8 checkmate, so he has to play king e7. And now just queen g4, and once again his weak king is important. Now queen b4 is immediately threatening a perpetual. So queen d4 to stop that. And now queen g5. And he surprised me by playing king d7. If he wants to keep playing for when he needs to play king f8, now bishop e4, but I should have really good drawing chances here. Queen f4, king g3. But still, I mean, I'm low on time, so you might still have chances. Of course, also the other way. You could miss something and still lose. Okay, so you play king d7, and now I play bishop e4, and he has no way to protect the pawn on g7. So you went king c7 to get his king off the 7th rank. And now I don't take on g7 in fact, but I go for the e6 pawn with queen e7. I think queen d7 is a perpetual here, at least. Well, not at least, it's probably just perpetual. King d8. Well, I don't know, maybe there might be even more, so this could be dangerous here. Bishop c6, who knows? For example, queen e7 has queen a5. But he just went to king to b6, and now I pick up the e6 pawn, which is more important because my e5 pawn is more advanced than my g pawn, obviously. So king a5, and now it's kind of a situation of Zugzwang for me, because I don't have an obvious move to improve my position. So I play queen e7, which is pretty much forcing a draw, and I was quite happy with this result after the way the game progressed. If I was really to play for a win, I could have played king h3, which I saw, but I didn't want to stress my luck. If queen g1, I can just reply g3, and I find a very safe spot on g4. So if he doesn't want to, if he wants to avoid being worse, he needs to play queen d7, which is not an easy move to play, especially because you're facing two connected pawns here, but the king just returns and black holds. But I think it's black who has to be precise now. Alright. But also because for the match situation it was not important anymore if I was to win or draw, because we were behind 2.5 points already. I just said, okay, queen e7, also still with about 1 minute on the clock. It's just a gambling, pretty much. So now he can take on a6, but I saw that I can force the perpetual here. Even though I wasn't 100% sure, I thought he still wanted to play queen b4, and during the game I didn't see how to play here, because queen takes b4, what I thought originally, I noticed then that I'm not winning here on the spot. What I was hoping, e6 threatening e7, but he plays rook d6, bishop f5. Now e7 is once again the threat, but he has rook d5. And now g4 and king c5. And he's just in time to return with his king, and he's just winning here. But the problem with queen b4 is that I first play bishop c6. He can't take, of course, because his queen would drop, but after king c5, now indeed the e-pawn will queen, and I'm winning, because rook e2, I just played bishop e4 back, and now you can't even stop it at all anymore. Rook d2, e7, and that's it. So he didn't play that, because he also felt probably it's risky. So we just repeated moves here and made a draw. So very exciting game. Overall, of course, I was lucky to get the draw. I was low on time and position was bad, but I just kept trying, and he made some inaccuracies, namely, well, 3 you could say. Instead of knight a5, queen b6, I think was the simplest way, and then later knight f5 and g6, which was not easy to spot, and then queen e1, also quite a difficult move to play. I just want to share these variations with you because, like I said, very exciting game, and I hope you enjoyed it, and then I'll see you again in another video. Bye.